Hi everybody, welcome to the latest episode in Gracious Living in the Time of Corona. Today I'm going to share with you my famous meatloaf recipe. I have it here on a 3x5 card that I wrote in 1970 when I was making pizza in Kenmore Square in Boston. And I've refined it over the years, and I think it's just about the most delicious meatloaf. And on top of that, I figured out a way to do a keto version that doesn't have any carbohydrate. And here's all the ingredients and materials that you need to do this. And I'm going to share the 3 secrets to making meatloaf that is not dry and crumbly. So the first secret is fat. So we're gonna have a lot of fat, and that's what carries the flavor and makes the meatloaf delicious and moist. What I always do is I take 4 pounds of ground chuck or some kind of hamburger, 80 to 85% fat. Don't use the really lean stuff, or your meatloaf will be dry. So here's 4 pounds. This is actually from Sonoma Meat Company, and it's a grass-fed ground chuck that I think is going to be just great. And I'm going to mix that together with 1 pound of some pasture-raised ground pork. You can use pork sausage. Don't worry about the fat. And I'll blend those together, and you're going to need a big bowl to do it. So here's my bowl. I'll go ahead and toss these guys in there. So as I blend everything together, the second trick to having a meatloaf that's not crumbly is to minimize the amount of kneading that you do. So you just do enough to mix everything without over kneading. All right, let's go to look at the other ingredients we're going to need. I'm going to take a couple of loaf pans here, and I'm going to line them with bacon. So you want to use a thin cut bacon. I really like Oscar Meyer. It's more expensive than other bacons, but as a readily available national brand, I think it's the best. So I'll set that up. Then I'm going to lay down some bay leaves underneath the meatloaf to give it a wonderful flavor. So you're going to need some bay leaf. I have here 2 tablespoons of oregano. I'm going to take that and rub it between my hands to make it fine and toss it in there. 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. And then you can use 2 cups of breadcrumbs, but because I'm on a keto diet, I much prefer to use pork rinds. And so I'm gonna crush these. Just open the bag a little bit to let the air out. There's 2 ways to do this. One is to take a nice big rolling pin and mash those. If we want to turn them into the consistency of breadcrumbs, I'm just going to toss them in my Vita-Mix here. Now that'll turn them into breadcrumbs right away. And then I'll be mixing those with 4 eggs. That's really what holds the meatloaf together. You've got to have eggs in a meatloaf. Pork rinds in order to get a binder that'll hold everything together. So we're just going to blend that. And you have to keep moving them around. I've already got it done on the bottom, and now I can get the stuff on the top. Okay, easy peasy. So now I'm going to just toss these in with the meat. You can see the consistency there. It's just like breadcrumbs. Okay, that's done. Now you don't have to rinse this out because we're going to use it to mince our onions in just a second here. We're going to take about that much butter in a skillet, and I'm going to chop this onion and 4 cloves of garlic here, and we're going to saute them in butter for just a little while to brown them. So I'm going to go over here and get this on the stove and preheat the oven to 350. Okay, now I covered how to chop an onion in my last series, but just to remind you, the trick to an onion is you want to make sure it's cold so that you don't cry when you peel it. So I just took it out of the refrigerator, and now I'm going to peel off all this extra outer stuff. I cut right here, leaving the stub, the root there, intact to hold the whole onion together, make it easier to chop. Now I'm going to beat up 4 eggs here. So just pop them all in there. You can stop. We just need to beat them up a little bit here. And we'll just drop that in there along with those great little flakes. Now we cut that onion in half, lengthwise like this, and we'll cut each one of these almost to that root nub there. And with wedges that are pretty close together. Still, the whole thing is still one piece, so it makes it really easy to hold it. And the secret here is that if the onion is too coarsely chopped, then it's going to make the meatloaf fall apart. So we get this just as fine as we can. And then we're going to toss it all, just to be sure, into the Vita-Mix for a little bit. And let's get these, garlics, crush them a little bit so they sit where they belong, and then we'll just mince that up. And we're going to throw the whole thing in the Vita-Mix, and then we're going to brown it with butter in the skillet. Okay, I've got all that chopped up. You got to get yourself one of these great little chopping boards with a little tub here that holds everything. I just love these things. I'm going to put all that into the Vita-Mix and then give it a real good mince so that it will be very fine. And we'll fold right into the meatloaf. That's beautiful. Okay, that'll go. Okay, so that butter's all melted and it's ready to go. And I'm just going to pop this stuff in here. We're going to give it a nice browning. You'll have to have your heat pretty high once the onion is in there, so it doesn't, so that you can actually brown. And then we'll just keep this moving around until it's nice and brown. So here we are. That's just where you want it, just lightly brown. Take the edge off of it, and then we're going to toss that into our meatloaf. Alrighty, so now the secret ingredients. And the secret ingredients are Worcestershire sauce, like so, oregano. So we take this, you can either get ground oregano or you want to activate this stuff by rubbing it like this. And you'll see that your hands smell wonderful when you do that. So that's in there. About 2 tablespoons of oregano. Very good. And then the master stroke, this is what I learned back in Kenmore Square, is that you want to put in about 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. And that's the whole thing. Now we're just gonna get in there, roll up our sleeves, and turn this into a meatloaf. So I'm just gonna kind of squish that pork into the beef. So we want to give it lots of fat. We want to get everything mixed, but we don't want to overmix it and break down the structure any more than we have to. So here I am. I kneaded this for maybe 3 minutes. And the main thing is just to make sure that you have everything incorporated, that you don't have any pockets of egg or your crumbs or any of that. And it's all just in there. Then you take it and kind of knead it just a little and bring that together. And that's gonna be your meatloaf right there. Okay, so now we've got a meatloaf, and I'm gonna here, take a look at what I've done here in the loaf pans. I've lined these things with bacon. That's going to give us flavor and fat and kind of baste the whole thing. And then my trick is to take, for each of these, take 2 bay leaves and put 1 on each end, and then load the meatloaf on top. Now, bay leaves have a lot of flavor, but they're also bitter, so you don't want to eat the bay leaf, but you do want its flavor. So I'm just putting them in here. Why not give them an extra? And then what happens, you would think that wouldn't really flavor the whole meatloaf, but it does, because you're in this bath of fat. Fat is gonna pull all the flavor out of the bay leaf and just deliver it up into the whole meatloaf. So let's just get to work here and just load that, just trying to keep any air bubbles from happening. Not much to this, really. You don't want to overload, because this thing's going to swell and the oil may go over the edge, and as you can see, we can push in these little, and you know, I do eat ketchup with my meatloaf, but for God's sake, don't put it on the meatloaf when you're baking it. All right, so let's get the rest of this right in here. Perfect fit. And we're ready to go. So let's go over the oven, which we've got preheated. And I'm going to share another couple of secrets here. Now, meatloaf is basically the American version of pâté. And why does French pâté taste so much better than American meatloaf? The answer is right here. So before I load these guys in, I'm going to put underneath a pan of water. And it just has to have enough water in it that it won't all evaporate in the hour that we're going to be cooking this thing. So I just put that right underneath, and what that's going to do is it's going to steam regulate the temperature of the meatloaf so that it doesn't dry out. And And I'll just put those meatloafs right on top there. And then the other trick, just like any piece of meat, is you gotta use a thermometer. You stop at 140, and then when you bring it out, it will rise to 150 on its own. And that's the perfect point where you still have a little bit of pink in the middle. And that's the way the French make pâté. And so now we just gotta wait an hour. Okay, I've been checking in on this thing every 5 minutes or so, and that's 55 minutes. So come in here, and let's see how these little guys are doing. The type of meat thermometer I have doesn't live inside the meat. So I'm just going right into the core of it. And what we're looking for is 140. So you see that takes a little while. It's going to come up. And there we are, right at 140. That's exactly where we want to be. So we are good. Now I'm going to just take these out and set them to cool. They're actually gonna warm up another 10 degrees or so as they sit there, and then they'll be perfect. Take this pan that kept them at the right temperature and just dump that. I want to talk to you now about spices. So here I've used oregano and bay leaf in this recipe. Spices are the biggest ripoff in the grocery store. It's really unbelievable. What I have here, let's see, it's 0.32 ounces, and this thing costs $4.95. So that's really expensive. But the truth is that I have the jar, but what's actually in the jar I bought in bulk at Whole Foods. And I paid about 10% because I'm buying spices by the pound, and it takes an awful lot. It takes a hat box full of oregano to make a pound. So it's about 20 bucks a pound, which means that what I actually paid for here instead of $5 was about 25 cents. Same for bay leaf, same for cumin, same for really any spice. They're readily available in premium grocery stores such as Whole Foods. Here we have a lot of other places like Oliver's that do the same thing, and that's where you want to buy your spices. These guys really like to rip off the novice cook who's just looking at a recipe and just wants to go to the store and figure it all out, and so they buy Schillings or McCormick or 365, and they just get completely burned.
Oh, to sneeze.
Ah, my dear. Okay, I have poured you a barrel sample of the 2017 Grenache from the Bates Ranch, Santa Cruz Mountains. So that's the wine we poured at our wedding, only 3 vintages later. What do you think?
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We're going to slap it in the bottle next month. So I thought that might be a pretty good accompaniment. Mm. So here we have our meatloaf, and as I predicted, it's come up to temperature there at about 150. That's just where we want it, and that shows the meat is fully cooked, but it still has a little bit of tinge of red, and of course it's wrapped in that shirt of bacon. So,
yep,
Oscar Meyer bacon. So, what do you think?
What, can I cut into it?
Oh, anyway? For heaven's sakes, yes.
It smells so wonderful.
Uh-huh. What are you smelling? Are you smelling the garlic and the bay leaf and
yep,
things like
all that?
Yeah.
What I'm smelling is savory.
Yes.
Generally savory.
That's right. A little spinach garnish there, so the heck with that.
Yep.
Well, now I have a question for you, and I know you have a fixed opinion about this. Is meatloaf better right out of the oven, or is it better after it sits for a day or two in the fridge and is reheated?
Well, if you're asking me would I be willing to wait a day to have the rest of this? No.
Well, I don't think we can eat it all tonight. But
Well, and we don't have to. And it will get better day after day.
yeah, that's what I think too. It's really great, you know, piping hot out of the oven, but then the flavors kind of marry, and it's no slouch days later. And I find you can even freeze it. That's what I'm going to do with one of our loaves, and then we'll just work through the rest of this throughout our week of sheltering in place.